All right. It's another one of these Homeric Rhapsody things. We're in what's known as book 6 to us. Hector went to the city and spoke to Hecate. And so, leaving his mother to make the prayers, those unanswered, unseen prayers that would hope to save the city of Troy, Hector went forth looking for his brother Paris, who was absent from the battlefield ever since his fated duel with Menelaus. He ranged through the city streets, asking about, and finally came to that well-built house made by the craftsman that Paris lived in with his wife Helen. He went up to the chambers, and found there, upon entering the room, Paris Alexandros, fiddling with his armor and playing with the straps, as if they were for decoration only, and not for battle. He did not look like one who was preparing for war, or who was planning to go back out on the field. Hector entered the room. Helen stood up, and Hector said to his brother, not seeing her, "What is this?" "My brother, that one who has caused so much strife among the Trojans, the Lycians and Dardans, and all their allies, sits here, playing with his armor like some girl who had come from frolicking in the field and had not a care in the world. Why is it that you sit here with no thought for all those men who die in your name? What is this thing that has been raised by our honored mother and father, even if for only a few years since your return? Where has all that courage gone that you claim to have? I did not see it on the battlefield with Menelaus during that duel in which you somehow fled from the sight of all those there present, and I do not see it now." Paris heard his words and said to him, "Ah, dear brother Hector, you are not wrong. All these things you say to me are true. But I beg you, do not spurn the gifts of an Olympian goddess. They are beyond your understanding or mine. We can only do with what the gods have made us. And I was spirited here by Aphrodite. She does not want to see me fall in the field to Menelaus, not yet at least. And I was here. My good wife Helen was only just now telling me, chiding me in fact, that I should go back out onto the field, asking me to once again risk my life in that horrible fray. But I was preparing my armor, no matter what you may have thought it looked like, and I was planning to go back out on the field. Soon all will see that bravery for which I have claimed myself, for even if I not be so valiant in hand-to-hand combat, none can match me with the bow, and I have been known to throw quite a strong spear in my day, if not the best of the Trojans with that weapon." Hector said to him, "My strange brother, yes, none would doubt your valor on an open field among the armies. You have shown your bravery time and time again. You have lost this day to Menelaus, though that loss has still caused us even more strife with the deeds of Pandarus, your friend, who had struck up another combat with the Achaeans and rekindled this entire war. But we shall head back to the field, and you shall prove that valor, so that all the Trojans and all the Dardans and Lycians will see that you at least fight alongside them, and do not spurn their help and their suffering and their tears. Paris said to him, I had not heard this about Lycaon's son, Pandarus. What has become of him? Is he still out there fighting? And Hector replied to him, I have not seen the thing, but I heard reports that Diomedes, who has been raging through the battlefield, or one of his helpers, Sthenelus, that son of Capaneus, or some other of the Argive forces, has slain him, that he lies face down on the battlefield. For all the crimes he has committed against Troy, it is the least that could be said just for him. Paris was sore at heart for this, and he was spurned even faster to go and prepare his armor, thinking in his head that he might try to save that corpse of Lycaon's son, if there still be anything to save of his armor or his body, to give back to that city where he had come from. Pandarus, who had feasted many a time under the walls of Troy, and who had always been so gracious to Paris, that son of Priam, and made him to laugh, and given him so many stories, him and his brothers, over the years. Thus Paris was set afire even more to head to the city, or out of the gates, that Scaean gate, where so many who were not to return had departed. And he said, Hector, I will prepare my armor. I will see you on the field. You head forth first, or we shall come together. I shall take a few minutes if you wanted to go and find your wife and child before you go back to the field. But I shall be fighting even more wroth for the loss of that great Pandarus, he who had taught me so many of his skills with the bow, and who had fought so valiantly with his men that he brought with him to Troy. Hector, while Paris was preparing his armor, was glad to hear that those words he shared, not uncalculated, had spurred Paris to even more battle fury. He went, made to leave the room, and as he was going, that golden-tressed Helen, the one for whom all had been fighting, made and grabbed his arm. She said to him, Dear Hector, who has always been kind to me, why could my husband not be one such as yourself, who has always protected the city of Troy and has never shirked a fight, not in all his days? Even to your own ruin would you protect this city and your loved ones and those of everyone else under these walls. Here, sit down by me. Let us have a moment together before you go back onto the battlefield and risk your life once again. Those limbs must be tired from all the men you have slain and all the arrows and spears you have shielded your men from. Hector said to her, O Helen, I do not blame you for all that has happened, though you have constantly blamed yourself. But do not ask me to stop now. I cannot take a moment. I will go and seek out my wife and son, and I will head back to the battlefield, for even now, every minute that I spend out of the battle, more of my men will fall without me to protect them. So let me go, and I will do my best as I have always done. Thus saying, Hector strode from the room and from the house, never to see it again. All right, not so bad. That was an instance where, so again, what we're doing here is not necessarily trying to retell the story, or not trying to tell the story as we know it, but rather using all the, 25 or however many translations I've read in an amalgam, plus all the other works of you know, poetry and plays and reference material of Greek stuff, ancient Greece and wherever, to forge it all into some kind of a, a, a living work. And that involves making up new pieces. And all that to say that I thought it was interesting to do that little moment where Paris, it was actually kind of a unexpectedly little complex character moment that I created where I added this thing about Pandarus being killed, that Hector tells Paris about that, and that I invented a little like friendship between Pandarus and Paris, assuming that it's kind of like in Chaucer's thing where Pandarus is like friends with Troilus, who is a brother of Paris and Hector. Um, and so I figured like, you know, Paris probably hung out with him too, and that Hector would use that then to force Paris into more heated, like wanting to go back into the battle, because he already kind of did, because he was being like forced by Helen to go. But I figured that this would be a more interesting character motivation, and that you could kind of introduce this little moment where he reflects on somebody who had been killed, which happens a lot mid-combat. You know, somebody's angry about a comrade that's been killed, and then they go and fight somebody else because of it. But it doesn't, there's not that many moments out of combat where you hear that, other than like people being injured, and then, you know, the Achaeans are getting upset about how many guys they're losing. But I thought it was kind of a cool moment. And again, we don't really know how many of these, like, if you imagine Homer's thing, he couldn't write anything down. They didn't have writing at that time. And we don't know what was in his like outline when he was telling these stories, and which things in the story we know that he just kind of came up with on the spot, and then it stuck, you know? So any of the stuff that's in the Iliad we know could have been stuff like that, where I just invented this thing with Paris and Pandarus on the spot based on other works that we know about, that were invented even after the time of the Iliad, or after the time of ancient Greece in general, but fit into this story, and could have been making up on the spot. There's a lot of things where Homer changes what's typically considered canonical, you know, Greek history. Like, you know, he gives a different mother to Aphrodite, and a different like lineage to her. He changes a couple of different things. I can't come up with it off the top of my head, but there's a few different things that he changes from what is considered typically the usual thing. And he's just doing that because he wants to, you know, because that's what his story did, or maybe he thought it would be more interesting for the thing he was telling. And I think in order to be true to that story, we have to not stick to it that much, and to use the spirit of what Homer was doing, which is to say, alter it using the historical backing and the mythological knowledge that we have in the same way that he might have. So what I'm trying to do is not necessarily be true to Homer's, you know, the dusty old tomes of Homer that we have remaining to us, which who knows how many times in Athens and wherever else over the, you know, millennia, that those have been changed anyway. Who's to say that they're even accurate? That we would, instead of staying true to that, you stay true to the spirit of Homer, which is what we're trying to do here. And again, all this is in service of writing more interesting written content for the game that I'm doing. And so, especially for that, what we're doing here is more useful. But even just as a means of telling the story, I think it's pretty cool. So that's another moment, similar to when I did that retelling of Achilles, Agamemnon, and the Sea of Calchas, where I added like new motivations for the kind of weird triangle that happens between them. If I were to tell the story again, that would be like a thing that I would like lock in and say like, that's something I'm going to keep in my version, even though it wasn't in the original as we know it. This thing with Paris and Pandarus, I think I would also keep as like, I would lock that in as like, I liked that as a little moment that's not in the Iliad, but it would be in my Iliad. So yeah, again, still a little stilted with my stuff, but overall relatively happy with it. Let's keep going.